Hi, Kylie here. Today I'd like to invite you along as I create the mini collages I made to compare a range of matte, gloss and gel mediums to use as an adhesive for collage, mixed media and art journaling. In this video, I'll use a whole range of exactly the same art supplies underneath and on top of these mediums for each of the 10 little collages, so we really can compare them exactly. And they don't turn out all the same. At the end of the video, I'll group the mediums into our top performers, the ones that sit in around the middle range, and the ones that didn't perform so well. So come along and I will chat through my process as we go. I'll just start by letting you know that these are in no particular order. However, we have started with one of my favourites, which is the Liquitex Gel Matte or Matte Gel, whichever way. This one is not the thickest in the Liquitex range. They do have a even heavier body gel than this. However, I prefer this one than the extra heavy gel simply because, as you can see there with the pattern papers at the bottom, I am laying down some light papers, some cardstock there and some lighter papers. This is a piece of tissue I'm putting down now. And so if you're doing a mixture like this where I've got in one collage both sorts of paper, you want the product to be able to handle both. So if you're going too heavy, you're going to be needing to swap back and forwards. So moving on to this Liquitex matte medium, same more or less similar product, only it's not a gel, it's just a very fluid version of that does a similar collaging job, at least both adhesives. And in terms of acrylic painting, this would make your paint more fluid, whereas the last one would make your paint more thick. But for what we're using it for here, the fluid paint is great for the softer papers. Moving on to the golden regular gel matte, this is probably the heaviest matte that I've used. There are two actually more, I think, in the golden range that are heavier again than this, but as much as what I said at the first place with the Liquitex, I don't like to go that heavy. So this is actually the exact same viscosity as the golden heavy body paint. So if you've got those paints, you'll be able to picture exactly what consistency this is. And I found it just that slight bit heavier than the Liquitex matte gel. I really found this quite a joy to use actually. It had a lot of body to it and it works really well. You didn't need too much of it to get the job done because, it's such a quality product, you don't need to overwork it. So that's the golden one. And then we move on to the other end of the spectrum, which is just the Crafters product, which is Portercraft. Now it says heavy gel, but I don't know if you can see there how translucent that's going down compared to the other heavy gels we've been looking at. It's just not as dense as you would normally expect a heavy gel to be. And it's not a problem or anything, but just worth knowing. For me, what that means is that you use a lot more product to get the job done, so therefore it doesn't work out to be quite as economical. And as you can see there, that's being able to scoop up on a brush okay, so it's fine to use but didn't have a lot of substance to it. This is the Atelier Heavy Gel Gloss, so this is our first gloss product. Now this is really quite heavy to push around, as you can see there with paintbrush. I'm really kind of scraping it down a little bit to get it off the brush, so not great for the brushes. But in terms of for a gel, for a gloss gel I should say, I think it's wonderful. I just don't use gloss a lot for the top of a collage for many reasons which I've explained elsewhere. However, if you do want a gloss, then this is a great one, and I actually do even prefer it than the Liquitex gloss. It's just gives a really nice finish, and you can't really see there, but you'll see later it does leave a real shine on the page. The Dina Wakley Soft Gel Medium, it's not really a gel, so I'm not sure why it's called a gel. It's really more of a matte medium. Oh, I don't even know if it's a matte because it's a little bit glossy, but It's just a medium. It's not really a gel. It's extremely thin, and I would say I found it as thin as the Portercraft Crafters product, and I found it also had unexpected, because I haven't used it a heck of a lot. I did have it in my range, but it had an unexpected gloss on the surface, which I wasn't really expecting. This is the ultra thick gel medium, and as you can see that going down, that had a lot more body to it. It's still not got the density that some of the more higher quality products had, and it's just, I guess, it doesn't feel like it's got maybe the same substance. However, it is a really nice consistency, and it really handles both the cardstock and the thinner papers. So it's much like that Liquitex one that I mentioned in the beginning, the matte gel, just from the point of view that it sits nicely in the middle from my point of view, in that you can move between all your different types of papers and it will handle all of them. It just probably gives a slightly different finish on the surface than what I'm used to. This is the Liquitex Gloss Heavy Gel, and as you can see, I'm trying to scrape that off my brush because it's just so thick. Lovely for a gloss, but I actually do even still prefer the Atelier one in terms of the finish. However, that's just for me because I'm using it mainly for mixed media, whereas I assume that for people, I'm sure people are using it for impasto and other techniques with their acrylic painting would have a completely different experience of this and indeed of all of these products. Just because they're reviewed a certain way for mixed media doesn't mean that they should be reviewed in the same order of preference for another application, because they could shine in a different application, and I'm sure that this Gloss Heavy Gel would be excellent for impasto and other things. The Mod Podge Matte, this is by far the runniest one from today's range, and it was kind of dripping everywhere and a bit hard to manage actually. As you can see, it looks very gluey there, and it essentially is very gluey. It's such a beautiful product for decoupage, and I've made some lovely things with Mod Podge, beautiful Christmas baubles and those kinds of decoupage items where you're decoupaging onto hard objects and then you're not putting layers over the top of them, and you want a nice glossy, even though this is matte, but you're wanting a nice hard exterior. However, it doesn't lend itself well to mixed media at all, but I just wanted to demonstrate it for you so that you could see it. The Distress Collage medium was a very unusual product. You can see how small the jar is and how much I used just for this one little collage. So I actually think I've seen videos on it used probably for a different purpose, which I don't tend to use it for because I'm not really a card maker very often, and I think it's great for those kind of things, making tags and so on, but I think maybe not so much for these large, or this is only mini, but if I was doing this larger, which I normally would be, you would probably pretty much use up the whole jar just to get your collage down. That being said, it does dry really nicely, and it doesn't feel all kind of gluey and so on. It is a really good product. I just think that this is probably not the right application for it, what we're trying to do here, where we're going under and over quite a volume of different products, but it did do the job. So moving on to our next layer, it's now the next day and we've got all of these products dry, and I'm going ahead and putting our art supplies on. Unfortunately, when I filmed this, it was a summer storm here in Perth, and of course I've sped this up, so it was filmed over a couple of hours, and the sun and the rain were coming and going through the clouds, so I'm sorry that the lighting changes quite a lot, and also the camera had a lot of trouble dealing with the glossy surfaces, so the lighting's not the best in all of the areas, but some of it's absolutely fine, just goes in and out a little bit. Anyway, as you can see here, I am using all of the exact same supplies on every sample, so you'll see them used again and again, and they do all perform entirely differently depending on the surface. So these here, you've got your Posca pens going down, and just a little tip, always best to use your Posca pens first in a project, because those nibs are very quick to get ruined if they touch anything else that's not completely dry. So I always start off with the Posca pens, and then as you can see there, I've followed up with Faber-Castell Pitt pens and with Neocolor crayons. I'm just trying to use a little bit of everything so I can try out the surface really well. And now you've seen me pick up the Inktex pencils. That was after having put down some paints and some inks. And at this point, the surface is actually getting quite wet. All of those products I was putting down, I've been spreading around with water. So it really is getting quite wet, but the Liquitex has given it the perfect surface to coat with water, and it's allowing me to get quite a complexity of different products to give different effects. Now this is the matte medium, and I think it more or less gave the same result or similar result, it felt like to me, than as the last one, the gel medium. I don't know if you can see really that closely, but there's the surface of the page for both of them is really quite natural. There's no real, there is a very slight discoloration you can see around the edges where I've gone there, but not really to the naked eye. And so it's sort of, when you're looking at your collage, you really feel like you're seeing the papers and all of the elements really beautifully. They're not sort of hidden under a layer of plastic or anything like that, which some of the other ones lean towards. And yeah, this is handling acrylic paints, Inktense pencils that have been washed out with water, lots of ink. I'm using different viscosities of paint there. That one that just went down was a golden heavy body, but we've also got some Matisse, and on the right there some high flow. At the moment I'm using some Liquitex ink, and it is really runny, so that's why I've got that cloth soaking up the excess. And I think that's the important thing, is that I need to be able to make it wet in order to get the effects that I want. So here we've got the golden, and this one had, I would have to say, probably the most natural surface out of all of them. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but you can't really see any halo at all of where the product's been. It really just looks like it's a natural product. And as I'm putting down those colours, like if you see with that Posca pen, for example, it's just going down perfectly as if I was drawing on paper, whereas some of the ones you'll see later, the colour just wouldn't go down. It was pretty much useless. It's like I wasn't drawing on it at all. So that's a nice thing about having the natural surface, is that it's just like you're just working on paper when you're putting down your pencils and things. And then again, when you're coming along to mess them all up, which is the way I like, that sort of distressed look and everything to kind of work in together to create some complexity. You can see there's a lot of water going down and smoothing things around. In later ones, when I'm putting that down, when I go back and smooth them around, they just pretty much wipe straight off as if it's just got no tooth to hold any product on the top. So this was a very successful piece. I didn't have a a single product there out of all of those art supplies that didn't work perfectly on top of this golden regular gel. So I was really very happy with that. That's just some heavy body paint going down on the top, and that's just some golden high flow, a white, titanium white there, and that's just to try and make everything blend in, so it doesn't, just sort of ties it all together. Now this is the porter craft that we've looked at, being at the crafting end, and actually for a craft product it didn't do too bad. Like, you can still see that pink has gone down off the Posca pen. However, what you'll notice there with that black food pen, a food ball I think it's called, something like that, is that black is, I don't know if you can tell with those squares, but they're actually sort of beading on the surface. So it's sort of giving it a not very attractive appearance. It's just sort of almost like bubbling a little bit. So it's just sitting on top is what I'm trying to say. And here with these Faber-Castell Pitt pens and with these Neocolors, normally what you do with both those products is once you put them down, you blend them either with your finger or with a cloth or with a paintbrush. And when I've tried to do that, it's virtually just coming straight off the page. It's not blending and moving around and smooshing and making lots of nice colour. It's just rubbing straight off. So even those, you see that those ink drops I've put down, trying to move them around and they're just kind of, they're just coming off. So I think the issue with some of these products is that you may buy them and then you think to yourself, well, I don't know why my product that I'm making is not turning out very well. I'm doing what I've learned in the class or whatever, and it's actually because your base layer is not giving you any support and you're doing exactly what you should be doing. It's just not really working for it because the product's not at the right standard. So now this is the Atelier Heavy Gel Gloss. Now we're moving back into a good brand here. This is an artist grade product, and so you can see that, for example, the colour on the Posca pen is going down. The issue is that a gloss surface doesn't take as many of the products so well. It does take some, and it does work out. You can make it work, and I have done that myself. But if you just see me trying to sort of smudge that Pitt pen there, because of the glossy surface, it's just rubbing off instead of smearing around the place, which is what I wanted it to do. So likewise, I think the pencil you just saw me there use was a charcoal, and normally that gives quite a black sort of watercolory kind of effect, and it just didn't really, the water wouldn't sit on the surface, it just came straight off. So that's the thing with gloss, it just doesn't let you kind of sketch quite to this or anywhere close to the same degree on top. It does take acrylic paint. In fact, most of the ones we tried, even the cheaper ones that were less satisfactory, took acrylic paint on top. So that's good to know, because if all you really put on top of your medium is acrylic paint, then you possibly can get away with the less expensive ones because they're not going to be so sensitive. Can you see how that's quite a little bit messy and not quite the look I'm going for there? Because, it's just not going into the page the way I want it to. So this is the Dina Wakley soft gel again. Now can you see that the yellow is just not going down? Like, you can hardly even see where I've been. Now that's come out quite strongly on some of the others. And then when I've gone to smudge it, this literally just wipes straight off, whereas it's the same thing I was doing on the others. So there's some kind of surface here on this Dina Wakley one which just wouldn't allow the products on top to get any traction. Even these Inktense pencils, which I find really generally work on everything. I wasn't getting a good result with them on this. I mean, there's a little bit showing there, but as I'm trying to smudge them, they're just wiping off. And you can see the difference because, this is getting the same treatment as all the others. And if you have a look at it as a whole, there's not really any complexity going into this piece. So moving over to acrylic paints, that will work well. And although even there I've tried to smudge it and you see it's just come kind of off. So yeah, it just wasn't a user-friendly surface at all. And in the end, I think I pretty much gave up on it for the most part after a while. I have used it a lot for collage in the underlayers, but yeah, maybe not on the surface for mixed media. This is the ultra thick gel, and as you can see with this Posca pen, it is taking the Posca a little bit better. It's still not brilliant, but a bit better. The Neo colours, which I just put on there, it's not really taking them well. And these Pitt pens, and I think the other products that I'm putting down, they're not coming off, which is great, but they're just not smudging to the same degree. I'm just not getting the same complexity that I wanted to get out of them. So I think it's got I wouldn't say glossy, but it just has a surface that isn't really just like the paper, and it doesn't seem to want the product to come to stay. So it is great for collage though, and good for acrylic paint. So if you're not wanting to use all these other products, it'll honestly be fine. And I think it does seem to take the Stabilo All pencil quite well as well, which is the last thing that was shown there. This is the Liquitex gloss. You can see the gloss on the page there, and that's struggling a little bit to take the colour. It's still taking it better than some of the others, but it is quite a shiny surface. And though that food ball, for example, is sort of beading up a bit, but it is taking the Posca pens. I guess essentially they are paint though, so that's probably not really surprising. I'm not sure I had the it certainly is better than some of the other products that we've looked at, but gloss is just not really going to be the surface that's going to accept as many mediums on top. It does give an absolutely beautiful finish if you're collaging papers onto a canvas and all you're doing is putting paint on, because you're going to get that beautiful vibrancy that comes from gloss. So it certainly has its place. It's just that's not really what I tend to do. I tend to always just want to add details. And the other thing is that when you've got gloss in an art journal, you're more likely to have your pages stick together, and in fact I have had that happen. I used gloss on something that was kind of important to me, actually. It was a book I was making, and yeah, some of the pages stuck together. It was really upsetting, and it was really hard to fix that. So if you are using gloss though, it's all you've got, then just using some cold wax over the top of your page does stop it from sticking, but then you lose the glossy effect, so you haven't really gained anything. The Mod Podge here, we've already spoken about Mod Podge. It's not really designed for purpose. It's hard to see in the photo here, but those book pages, when you see them in actuality, they have a weird texture. The Mod Podge hasn't really, like the other ones, the other samples, all of them pretty much, the book pages just, once they've been collaged down, they just look exactly the same. Whereas on this one, some of those papers almost got a bit deteriorated slightly in a funny way. So yeah, the Mod Podge didn't really handle the collaging as well, or as smoothly is probably a better way to say it. And it could have been because there were air bubbles in it, and maybe that got caught on the surface and that gave me that effect. I'm really not sure. But as you can see, I'm going to try and smudge those pencils and things, and they're just wiping straight off and really making a bit of a mess, to be honest. I have made, like I said already before, some great things with Mod Podge, so I'm not sort of putting the product down or anything, but as you can see, the products there we're putting on top are beading up and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. This is just the acrylic paint that we're putting on here, and that actually was one of the ones that probably didn't handle the acrylic paint as well. The Distress Collage medium, you can see that the Posca pen's struggling to draw on top of it. You can't even really see it, whereas that's been quite a dark colour on the others. And in the food pool will write on anything, but it again is beating up as well, and I'm struggling to work with it there. The near colours are actually doing pretty well, so this actually did surprise me. It worked a bit better than what I was expecting it to, and so sort of pretty much half and half. Not all of the products worked great on it, but that Faber-Castell Pitt pen's working better on here than it has on some of the other crafting samples. So yeah, it's just got a bit of a rough surface, and it was probably the feel of the surface that felt quite gluey. The product always has the feel, it feels a bit like, maybe not, I was going to say shoe polish. It's just got really unusual consistency, which I think makes it a brilliant glue, but as a surface that you want to work on, yeah, probably not the best. But yeah, still we're getting some okay results there. That white high flow is sort of running all over the place there. And then I was just using some heavier white paint to try and calm down some of the areas which hadn't really worked out. So that's the samples. There were just some very clear ones that at the front of the pack in terms of mixed media techniques and layering techniques, and all of those were definitely the mattes. And my top three started with golden. The reason there's four there is those two at the top were both golden. You can just see the amount of layers we've been able to bring in on top of each other there, and yet each individual layer still looks quite distinct and separate and quite vibrant and clear. So then after these top three, we went through to the middle of the range, and you can probably tell if you look closely at these pictures compared to the last ones. We'll have a look at the gloss, the Atelier one at the top. It has managed to hold more product. The Liquitex one, not much product's really stayed on there. However, the Atelier one is looking quite granulated and blotchy, so it hasn't given the natural kind of look or the performance that you would expect out of your products for all of them. The Dina Wakley one, you can see how it hasn't really held much product. However, there is no halo, and even the softer papers have gone down without a wrinkle, and it's actually done a beautiful job of the collage part of it. So that's why I've included it in with the medium samples, because it has done a great job of the collage, and that might be all you need it for. Now the last ones, I don't ever really like to put any product down because I'm sure there's a purpose for every product, but I have not found these fit for the purposes that I would be using them for. They have their place, just not for mixed media. When acrylic paint and other art supplies are involved. So feel free to write some comments about what your favourite products are. There's probably many that I haven't road tested. Please check out my other related videos, and if you found these helpful, like and subscribe.